In the vast expanse of the Galactic Coalition, where advanced civilizations wielded technology that could reshape matter itself and heal diseases with the touch of a scanner, there existed one problem that had stumped the greatest minds across 17 star systems. It wasn't a plague, a war, or even the collapse of hyperspace routes. It was something far more personal, far more devastating to witness. For 12 standard years, the daughter of Zephyrian Ambassador Kethmori had been dying slowly, her crystalline neural extensions growing inward like thorns, piercing deeper into her brain tissue with each passing day. The Galactic Medical Consortium had tried everything: quantum surgery, nano-reconstruction, even forbidden temporal reversal techniques. Nothing worked. The girl's agony was so intense that she couldn't speak above a whisper, couldn't move without trembling, and spent most days in a medically induced coma just to escape the pain. The ambassador had exhausted his fortune, his political influence, and his hope. Every species in the coalition had examined his daughter. The Vortex bioengineers, the Zenthuries quantum healers, the synthetic minds of the collective all had declared her condition impossible to treat without killing her. Then, in a rundown space station orbiting a backwater planet called Earth, a human with scissors, a comb, and absolutely no medical training would accomplish what the combined genius of the galaxy could not. Sometimes the most advanced civilizations forget the simplest solutions. Sometimes it takes a species that barely understands their own technology to see what others cannot. This is the story of how humanity's greatest contribution to galactic civilization wasn't faster than light travel, energy weapons, or artificial intelligence. It was something far more humble, far more human, and infinitely more powerful than anyone could have imagined. Ambassador Kethmori stood at the viewing port of his diplomatic vessel, watching the small blue-green planet turn slowly beneath them. Earth. Such an insignificant world in the grand scheme of the Galactic Coalition, yet here he was, having traveled 17 light-years on what most of his colleagues would consider a fool's errand. Behind him, his daughter Lyra lay motionless on the medical bed, her breathing shallow and labored despite the advanced life support systems keeping her stable. The crystalline neural extensions that marked her as one of the Zephyrian elite had begun growing inward 3 years ago, a condition so rare that only 12 cases had been documented in the past millennium. Unlike the normal outward growth that enhanced cognitive function and allowed telepathic communication, Lyra's extensions were piercing deeper into her brain tissue, creating a web of agony that no known technology could safely remove. "Father," Lyra whispered, her voice barely audible even in the silence of the medical bay. The effort of speaking caused the delicate crystal formations around her temples to pulse with a sickly blue light, and Kethmori watched as his daughter's face contorted in pain. "Rest, my dear one," he said softly, approaching her bedside. "We're almost at the station." Lyra's eyes, once bright violet like all Zephyrians, had faded to a dull gray from years of constant pain. The medical scanners showed the crystalline growth had accelerated again, now pressing against regions of her brain that controlled basic motor functions. The Coalition's finest doctors had given her weeks, perhaps days, before the extensions caused permanent brain damage or death. Dr. Varix, the ship's medical officer, approached with his usual grim expression. The Corthan physician had been with them for 2 years, ever since Lyra's condition had become critical. His reptilian features were drawn with exhaustion from the constant battle to keep her comfortable. "Ambassador, I must again advise against this course of action," Dr. Varix said, his scaled hands checking the readouts on Lyra's life support. "The humans have no experience with Zephyrian physiology. Their medical technology is primitive by Coalition standards. What could they possibly offer that we haven't already tried?" Kethmori turned back to the viewport. Below them, the orbital station designated as Harmony Hub grew larger. It was a human construction, built to facilitate trade and cultural exchange between Earth and visiting Coalition species. The design was crude but functional, lacking the elegant curves and bio-integrated systems of advanced Coalition architecture. "Dr. Varix, we have exhausted every option the Coalition has to offer," Kethmori replied. The Vortac bioengineers declared her case hopeless. The Zenthuries quantum healers said the crystalline matrix was too integrated to separate. Even the collective's synthetic minds concluded that intervention would be fatal. He paused, watching a human shuttle dock with the station. "Perhaps that's exactly why we need to try something different." The physician's secondary eyelids flickered, a sign of frustration in his species. "Sir, the humans barely understand their own neurological systems, let alone ours. they still use crude surgical instruments and chemical compounds. Their success rate in treating even their own species' brain disorders is questionable at best. Lyra stirred on the medical bed, her neural extensions pulsing more rapidly. Both men fell silent, knowing that any disturbance could trigger another episode of the excruciating pain that had become her constant companion. They had learned to move and speak carefully around her, as even slight vibrations could set off the hypersensitive crystal formations. "Father," she whispered again, and Kethmori took her hand, careful to avoid the smaller crystal growths that had begun forming along her arms. "The dreams are getting stronger." This was another symptom that puzzled the Coalition's medical experts. Lyra had begun experiencing what she called the dreams shortly after her condition worsened. She described them as visions of things she had never seen, places she had never been, and people she had never met. Most disturbing of all, many of these dreams seemed to feature humans and Earth, despite her having no previous exposure to either. "Tell me about them," Kethmori said, settling into the chair beside her bed. "I see a place with bright lights and mirrors everywhere," Lyra said, her voice gaining slightly more strength as she focused on the memory. "There are humans there, and one of them has hands that move like they're dancing. They're not afraid of touching hair, of changing it, making it beautiful." Her crystal extensions flickered. "In the dream, I have hair too, Father. Long and flowing, not these painful growths. And the human with the dancing hands, they're not trying to heal me. They're just trying to make me beautiful." Dr. Varix exchanged a look with the ambassador. Lyra's dreams had become increasingly specific and detailed over the past months, almost as if she were remembering rather than imagining. Some Coalition scientists theorized that her neural condition might be creating false memories, while others suggested the crystalline growths were somehow intercepting telepathic transmissions from unknown sources. The ship's communication system chimed, indicating they were being hailed by Harmony Hub. Kethmori activated the response channel, and a human face appeared on the main screen. The woman appeared middle-aged by human standards, with graying hair pulled back in what he had learned was called a ponytail. Her clothing was the standard administrative uniform of the station, but her expression was warm and welcoming. "Ambassador Kethmori, this is Station Administrator Chen. We've received your request for medical consultation and we're honored by your visit. I've taken the liberty of contacting several of our best physicians to review your daughter's case." "Thank you, Administrator Chen. We appreciate any assistance you can provide." Kethmori kept his tone diplomatic, though privately he wondered if this journey would prove as fruitless as all the others. "I should mention," Administrator Chen continued, "that we've also reached out to some of our civilian specialists. I know your diplomatic brief mentioned that traditional medical approaches have been unsuccessful, so we thought it might be worth exploring some alternative perspectives." Dr. Varix stepped closer to the communication unit. "Administrator, with all due respect, we are dealing with a highly complex neurological condition involving crystal and neural integration. I hardly think civilian opinions would be relevant to such a sophisticated medical case." The human woman's expression remained patient, though Kethmori detected a slight stiffening around her eyes. "Dr. Varix, I understand your concerns. However, we've found that sometimes a fresh perspective can reveal solutions that traditional approaches miss. One of our specialists has actually expressed particular interest in your daughter's case after reviewing the medical briefs you provided." "What kind of specialist?" Kethmori asked. "Well, that's the interesting part," Administrator Chen replied. "Marcus Rivera is actually a hairstylist, not a medical professional. He runs one of the most popular salons on the station. But he has an unusual background in biochemistry and materials science, and he's developed some innovative techniques for working with non-human hair and similar structures. When he saw the images of your daughter's condition, he had some thoughts that our medical team found intriguing." Dr. Varix's expression clearly showed what he thought of this suggestion, but Kethmori found himself curious. "What kind of thoughts?" "He believes the approach has been wrong from the beginning," Administrator Chen said. "According to Mr. Rivera, everyone's been treating this as a medical problem when it might actually be a cosmetic one." The statement was so unexpected that both the ambassador and his physician fell silent for a moment. On the medical bed, Lyra stirred and opened her eyes, as if she had heard the conversation despite appearing to be unconscious. "A cosmetic problem?" Dr. Varix finally managed to say, his voice rising slightly. Administrator, this child is dying. The crystalline structures are penetrating her brain tissue. This is hardly a matter of appearance. No, I understand that, the administrator replied quickly. What Mr. Rivera means is that the crystals might be growing in response to stress and trauma, similar to how human hair can change texture or even fall out during periods of physical or emotional distress. He thinks the crystals are trying to protect themselves by growing inward, but that's causing the damage instead of preventing it. Lyra spoke up from her bed, her voice stronger than it had been in weeks. The human with the dancing hands, she whispered. Father, I want to see the human with the dancing hands. Kethmori looked at his daughter, then, back at the screen where Administrator Chen waited patiently. Against all logic, against the advice of the Coalition's finest medical minds, against everything his diplomatic training told him about maintaining dignity and protocol, he found himself saying, Administrator, we would very much like to meet with Mr. Rivera. Excellent. We'll have Docking Bay 7 prepared for your arrival. And, Ambassador? Mr. Rivera asked me to tell you something. He said to let your daughter know that in his salon, everyone leaves feeling beautiful, no matter what species they are or what challenges they're facing. As the communication ended and their ship began its final approach to Harmony Hub, Kethmori noticed something he hadn't seen in months. His daughter was smiling. It was just a slight upturn of her lips, barely visible beneath the mass of painful crystal formations, but it was there. For the first time in years, Lyra looked hopeful. Dr. Varix ran another scan of her neural activity and frowned at the results. Ambassador, this is highly irregular. Her brain patterns are showing increased activity in regions associated with anticipation and excitement. I haven't seen readings like this since before her condition deteriorated. Kethmori watched as they approached the docking bay, where he could see humans moving about in their characteristic quick, efficient manner. Perhaps Dr. Varix was right, and this was a foolish waste of time. Perhaps a human hairstylist couldn't accomplish what the greatest minds in the galaxy had failed to achieve. But, as he looked at his daughter's face, seeing hope there for the first time in so long, he realized that the outcome mattered less than the attempt. Whether this Marcus Rivera could help Lyra or not, the simple act of trying something new, something different, had already given her something precious that all the advanced medical technology in the Coalition had failed to provide. It had given her hope. As their ship settled into the docking bay with the gentle thud of magnetic clamps engaging, Lyra sat up in her medical bed without assistance for the first time in months. The crystal formations around her head were still pulsing with pain, but something had changed in her expression. She was no longer just enduring her condition, she was fighting it. Father, she said, her voice carrying more strength than he had heard in years, I'm ready to meet the human with the dancing hands. Kethmori smiled, feeling something he had almost forgotten existed. Today, they would try something impossible. Today, they would trust in the ingenuity of a species that most of the galaxy still considered primitive. Today, they would discover whether hope could triumph where knowledge had failed. The docking bay doors opened, and they prepared to enter a world where miracles might still be possible. Marcus Rivera had been cutting hair for 23 years, and, in that time, he had worked with every conceivable texture, length, and style that human genetics could produce. When Harmony Hub opened and began attracting alien visitors, he had adapted his techniques to work with the chitinous head spines of the Vrotak, the flowing biofiber of the Delians, and even the crystalline formations of visiting Zephyrians. But nothing in his experience had prepared him for the challenge walking into his salon on sublevel C of the station. The young Zephyrian girl moved slowly, supported by a hoverchair that compensated for her weakened state. What should have been elegant crystalline neural extensions flowing from her temples and crown instead formed a chaotic, inward-growing mass that pulsed with obvious pain. Her father, Ambassador Kethmori, walked beside her with the careful attention of someone who had learned to watch for the slightest sign of distress. Marcus had spent the previous night studying every piece of medical data the ambassador had provided, cross-referencing it with his own research into crystalline growth patterns and stress responses in inorganic materials. What he had discovered had kept him awake until dawn, not from excitement, but from the sheer audacity of what he was considering. "Welcome to Rivera's," he said, gesturing toward the comfortable seating area he had prepared. The salon's usual bright lights had been dimmed to reduce potential triggers for Lyra's hypersensitive condition, and he had cleared away most of the standard equipment to create a calmer environment. "I'm Marcus. You must be Lyra." The girl looked up at him with those faded violet eyes, and Marcus felt his heart break a little. Even through the pain and exhaustion, he could see the intelligence and spirit that her condition was slowly stealing away. "You're the one from my dreams," she whispered, and Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. The human with the dancing hands. Ambassador Keth Mori stepped forward. "Mr. Rivera, I want to be clear about our situation. My daughter is dying. The finest medical minds in the coalition have exhausted every option. We're here because..." He paused, seeming to struggle with the words, "because we have nowhere else to turn." Dr. Verix, who had been silent since entering the salon, finally spoke. "Mr. Rivera, I've reviewed your credentials. While impressive for a civilian, you have no medical training, no experience with Zephyrian physiology, and no understanding of the complex crystalline matrix that comprises their neural extensions. I fail to see how cosmetic intervention could address a life-threatening neurological condition." Marcus nodded, understanding the physician's skepticism. "Dr. Verix, you're absolutely right. I'm not a doctor, and I don't pretend to understand Zephyrian neurology. But I do understand crystalline growth patterns, stress responses in inorganic materials, and how living systems interact with non-biological structures." He gestured toward Lyra's condition. "What I see here isn't a medical problem. It's an engineering problem." He activated a holographic display that showed the detailed scans of Lyra's neural extensions. The three-dimensional image rotated slowly, revealing the intricate pattern of inward growth that was causing her agony. "Look at the growth pattern," Marcus continued, using a light pointer to trace the crystalline formations. "This isn't random. There's a clear structural logic to it, but it's wrong. The crystals are trying to create a protective matrix, but they're building it in the wrong direction." Dr. Verix studied the display more carefully. The inward growth began approximately 3 years ago, coinciding with a period of significant emotional trauma for Lyra. Her mother died in a transport accident. Marcus turned to look at Lyra, who was watching the holographic display of her own condition with a mixture of fascination and fear. "Lyra, can you tell me what the pain feels like?" "Like thorns growing inside my head," she said softly. "But not just physical thorns. Emotional ones too. Every thought hurts, every memory stings. Sometimes I can't tell the difference between what I'm thinking and what I'm feeling, and it all just hurts." Marcus felt a piece of the puzzle click into place. The crystals aren't just growing inward physically. They're trying to create an emotional barrier too. They're attempting to protect you from psychological pain by isolating your neural pathways, but they're causing physical damage in the process. Ambassador Keth Mori leaned forward. "Are you saying her condition is psychosomatic?" "No, not psychosomatic. Psychoactive." Marcus turned back to the holographic display. "The crystals are responding to emotional input the same way they would respond to conscious telepathic direction. But, instead of receiving clear instructions, they're getting a constant stream of grief, fear, and pain. They're trying to help, but they don't understand what they're supposed to be protecting you from." Dr. Verix's expression had changed from skepticism to interest. "That would explain why conventional medical intervention has failed. We've been treating the symptoms, not the underlying cause." Marcus moved to a workstation and began pulling out tools that looked nothing like traditional medical instruments. Hair scissors, fine-toothed combs, small brushes, and bottles of what appeared to be styling products. The crystals need to be retrained. Not cut away or surgically altered, but guided back to their proper growth pattern. "With hair care products?" Dr. Verix asked, his skepticism returning. "With communication," Marcus replied. "Lyra, your neural extensions are essentially living crystal. They respond to bioelectric fields, emotional resonance, and conscious direction. But they also respond to physical manipulation, chemical interaction, and environmental cues. A good hairstylist learns to work with hair's natural tendencies, not against them. I'm betting the same principles apply here." He approached Lyra's hoverchair slowly, holding his hands where she could see them.
May I examine your extensions? I promise I'll be very gentle.
Lyra looked at her father, who nodded encouragingly. She turned back to Marcus. In my dreams, you weren't afraid to touch them.
Everyone else is always afraid they'll hurt me more.
Marcus carefully extended his hands toward the crystalline formations around Lyra's temples. The moment his fingers made contact with the outermost crystals, he felt a shock of sensation that was part electric, part emotional. Pain, yes, but, underneath it, a desperate longing for relief, for understanding, for help.
Amazing, he breathed. Lyra, I can feel what they're trying to do.
They're scared. The crystals are absolutely terrified, and they're trying to build a fortress to protect you, but they don't know how to build it properly.
Dr. Varix approached with his medical scanner.
Mr. Rivera, I'm reading significant bioelectric activity between your nervous system and Lyra's extensions.
This shouldn't be possible. Humans don't have the neural architecture for telepathic interface with Zephyrian crystals.
Marcus continued his gentle exploration of the crystalline formations, his trained fingers finding patterns and stress points that medical scanners might miss.
Maybe that's exactly why this is working. The crystals aren't trying to establish a telepathic connection with me. They're just responding to physical touch and emotional intention.
As he worked, Marcus began to understand the true scope of what had happened to Lyra.
Her neural extensions hadn't simply malfunctioned after her mother's death.
They had tried to help her process grief that was too overwhelming for a young mind to handle. But, without proper guidance, they had begun building inward instead of creating the outward expressions that would allow the emotions to be shared and processed through the Zephyrian collective consciousness.
Lyra, I need you to think about something pleasant, Marcus said, his hands still working gently through the crystal formations. A memory that makes you happy, something from before the pain started.
I can't, she whispered.
The crystals won't let me. Every time I try to remember something good, they push the memory away.
That's because they think happy memories will make you vulnerable to being hurt again, Marcus realized.
They're trying to protect you from feeling anything at all. He looked up at Ambassador Kethmori. Sir, I need your help. Can you share one of your favorite memories of Lyra with me? Out loud, so she can hear it too? The ambassador's eyes brightened.
When Lyra was 7, she decided she wanted to learn to sing like her mother. But Zephyrian vocal techniques require precise crystal resonance, and hers weren't fully developed yet. Instead of producing beautiful harmonics, she kept making this terrible squeaking sound.
He smiled at the memory.
But she was so determined. She practiced for hours every day, squeaking and squealing, driving everyone in our household nearly insane. As the ambassador spoke, Marcus felt a shift in the crystal formations under his hands. The rigid, inward-pointing structures seemed to soften slightly, as if they were listening to the story. And then, one day, the ambassador continued, she finally got it right. The first pure, perfect note. It was so beautiful that servants came running from all over the house to hear her sing. And, Lyra, she was so proud, she sang that same note over and over again until we had to beg her to stop. Marcus felt another shift, stronger this time. The crystals were definitely responding to the positive emotional content of the memory.
Lyra, can you remember that day? Can you remember how it felt to sing that perfect note? Lyra's eyes widened. I can remember. The crystals aren't pushing it away anymore. Dr. Varix's scanner began beeping rapidly. I'm reading significant changes in the crystalline matrix. The inward growth pattern is actually reversing in some areas. Marcus continued working, his hands moving with the practiced precision that had made him one of the most sought-after stylists on the station. But, instead of cutting and styling hair, he was gently coaxing crystalline neural extensions back to their proper configuration through a combination of physical manipulation, chemical treatment, and emotional resonance. The trick, he explained as he worked, is to give them a new growth pattern to follow. Something that incorporates the protection they're trying to provide but channels it in a healthy direction. He applied a solution from one of his bottles to a section of crystals near Lyra's left temple.
The substance was a mixture of his own design, combining mineral nutrients that promoted healthy crystal growth with mild sedatives that would reduce the hypersensitive pain responses. As the treatment continued, Lyra began to relax in a way that her father hadn't seen in years. The constant tension in her shoulders eased, and her breathing became deeper and more regular. "Mr. Rivera," she said softly, "why does this feel so different from what the doctors do?" Marcus smiled as he worked. "Because I'm not trying to fix what's wrong with you, Lyra. I'm trying to help you become who you're supposed to be. There's a big difference between healing and transformation." Dr. Verix looked up from his scanner, his expression one of amazement. "The neural pressure readings are decreasing across all sectors. Pain response indicators are dropping to levels we haven't seen since the condition began." "Mr. Rivera, what exactly is in that solution you're applying?" "Trade secret," Marcus said with a grin. "But I will tell you this much, it's mostly just hair conditioner with some mineral supplements." Sometimes the simplest solutions are the most effective. Ambassador Kethmori moved closer to his daughter's chair. "Lyra, how do you feel?" "Different," she said, and, for the first time in months, she didn't whisper. Her voice was still weak, but it carried a clarity that had been absent for so long. "The crystals are still talking to me, but now they're saying different things. Instead of warning me about danger, they're telling me about possibilities." Marcus stepped back to examine his work. The change was already visible. The chaotic, inward-pointing crystal formations were beginning to organize themselves into more natural patterns. It would take time, probably weeks or months of regular treatment, but the foundation for healing had been established. "This is just the beginning," he told them. "The crystals need to be retrained gradually. Think of it like physical therapy, but for crystalline neural structures. We'll need regular sessions to guide the growth process and help establish healthy patterns." Dr. Verix was still studying his scanner readings in disbelief. "In 20 years of practicing xenobiology, I have never seen anything like this. Mr. Rivera, you may have just revolutionized our understanding of psychoactive crystalline disorders." Marcus laughed. "Dr. Verix, I'm just a hairstylist who happened to notice that sometimes when you stop fighting with hair and start working with it, amazing things can happen. I figured the same principle might apply to crystal formations that are essentially doing the same job as hair, protecting and expressing the individual's identity." Lyra looked up at Marcus with eyes that seemed brighter than they had in years. "In my dreams, you made me beautiful. Are you really going to be able to do that?" Marcus knelt down beside her hoverchair and looked directly into her eyes. "Lyra, you were always beautiful. The crystals just forgot how to show it properly. All we're doing is reminding them how to shine." As they prepared to leave the salon, Ambassador Kethmori shook Marcus's hand with genuine gratitude. "Mr. Rivera, you've given us something we thought we had lost forever. Hope." "No, Ambassador," Marcus replied, watching as Lyra moved with less pain than she had shown in months. "I didn't give you hope. I just helped you remember that hope was always there, waiting for the right moment to grow." The session had been a success beyond anyone's expectations, but Marcus knew the real work was just beginning. Lyra's condition would require ongoing treatment, careful monitoring, and probably months of gradual adjustment as her neural extensions learned to follow their new growth patterns. But, as he watched the ambassador and his daughter leave the salon, Marcus felt a satisfaction that went deeper than any successful haircut he had ever completed. Today, he had discovered that the principles he had learned cutting hair could be applied to healing minds, that sometimes the most complex problems required the simplest solutions, and that hope could indeed triumph where knowledge alone had failed. Tomorrow, Lyra would return, and they would continue the work of teaching her crystals how to protect her by helping her shine rather than hiding her away. It would be the most important styling job of his career, and he was ready for the challenge. 3 weeks had passed since Lyra's first treatment with Marcus Rivera, and the changes were remarkable enough to draw attention from across the coalition. What had begun as a desperate attempt to help a dying child had evolved into something unprecedented in galactic medical history. Dr. Verix stood in the observation room above Marcus's salon, watching through one-way glass as the human hairstylist worked his seemingly impossible magic on Lyra's neural extensions. Beside him, Dr. Kellyanne Thorne, the coalition's leading expert on crystal and neural disorders, took notes on a quantum pad while 3 other physicians from various species observed in fascination. Day 22 of treatment, Dr. Thorne murmured into her recording device.
Subject shows continued improvement in all measured parameters.
Inward crystal growth has not only stopped but has begun to reverse in 17 of 23 monitored sections. Pain levels have decreased by approximately 60%, and cognitive function shows marked improvement. Below them, Marcus moved around Lyra with the fluid grace of someone completely comfortable with his work. Lyra herself sat in a specially modified treatment chair, no longer requiring the hover chair that had supported her during those first agonizing weeks. Her crystal formations, while still far from normal, had begun to take on a more organized structure that followed the natural flow patterns Marcus had identified. The most remarkable aspect, Dr. Thorne continued, is not the physical improvement, but the psychological transformation. The subject shows signs of genuine happiness and optimism for the first time since her condition began. Indeed, Lyra was laughing as Marcus worked, something that would have been impossible just a month ago. The hypersensitive pain responses that had made even speaking difficult had diminished to the point where she could engage in normal conversation, ask questions, and even express excitement about her treatment.
Marcus, will you teach me how to do that thing with the brush? Lyra asked as he worked a specialized solution through her crystal formations. The twisty motion you do that makes them sparkle? Marcus grinned.
It's all about working with the natural flow patterns, not against them.
Here, give me your hand.
He guided her fingers to touch her own extensions, something that would have caused excruciating pain just weeks before.
Feel how they want to move.
The crystals have their own rhythm, their own preferred directions.
You just have to listen to what they're telling you.
Ambassador Kethmori sat nearby, watching his daughter with an expression of wonder that hadn't faded since her first successful treatment. The diplomat who had once been preparing for his child's funeral was now watching her learn to care for neural extensions that were becoming more beautiful each day.
Lyra, do you remember what we talked about yesterday? Marcus asked as he worked. About how crystals grow in response to emotional environment.
You said they're like mood rings, Lyra replied, her eyes bright with interest. They change color and pattern based on how I'm feeling, but they also influence how I feel based on how they're growing.
Exactly. And what have you noticed about the colors over the past week?
Lyra reached up to touch a section of crystals near her left temple, where the new growth had taken on a subtle iridescent quality that shifted between blue and violet as the light caught it.
They're getting brighter. More colorful.
And, when they're really bright, I feel happier. Dr. Thorne looked up from her notes, intrigued.
Mr. Rivera, are you suggesting that the crystal formations are actively influencing the subject's emotional state?
Marcus nodded without pausing in his work.
It's a feedback loop.
Positive emotions promote healthy crystal growth, which in turn generates bioelectric patterns that enhance positive emotions. The reverse was happening before pain and trauma were causing destructive growth patterns, which created more pain and trauma.
Dr. Verix activated the intercom from the observation room.
Mr. Rivera, we're reading some unusual energy signatures from Lyra's extensions today.
Are you doing something different?
Actually, Lyra is doing something different, Marcus replied. Show them what you've been practicing, kiddo.
Lyra closed her eyes and took a deep breath.
As the observers watched, her crystal formations began to glow with a soft, steady light that pulsed in a rhythmic pattern. But, more remarkable than the visual display was the emotional resonance that seemed to emanate from her. Even through the observation room's shielding, the watching physicians could feel a sense of calm and contentment.
How is that possible? Dr. Kellyan whispered. Emotional projection of that intensity should require fully mature neural extensions and years of training. Marcus looked up toward the observation window.
Turns out that when crystals aren't spending all their energy fighting pain and trauma, they have a lot more capacity for other functions.
Lyra's extensions were always this capable.
They just needed to be taught how to use their abilities constructively. The demonstration continued as Marcus guided Lyra through a series of exercises designed to help her develop conscious control over her crystal formations. She practiced directing growth patterns, modifying color responses, and even generating simple harmonic frequencies that filled the salon with a sound like distant wind chimes.
the most fascinating aspect, Dr. Thorne noted, is that none of this follows conventional models of Zephyrian neural development.
The subject is developing capabilities that typically emerge only in late adolescence, and she's doing so without the traditional cultural training that usually guides the process.
Ambassador Kethmori stood and moved closer to his daughter. Lyra, can you project a memory for me? Something happy?
Lyra nodded and placed her hands on her crystal formations, her face taking on an expression of concentration. The crystals began to glow more brightly, and, suddenly, the air in the salon seemed to shimmer with shared experience. Those present found themselves experiencing a vivid memory of a 7-year-old Lyra successfully singing her first perfect note, complete with the overwhelming joy and pride she had felt in that moment. The emotional projection was so clear and powerful that several of the observers found themselves smiling involuntarily. Dr. Verix actually laughed out loud, something those who knew the serious physician had rarely witnessed.
Remarkable, Dr. Kellyan breathed.
She's not just projecting the emotional content of the memory, but the complete sensory experience. This level of neural integration should be impossible given the extent of damage her extensions sustained. Marcus finished applying the treatment solution and stepped back to examine his work. The chaotic mass of inward-growing crystal formations that had first entered his salon 3 weeks ago had been transformed into something approaching natural Zephyrian neural extensions, but with patterns and capabilities that were uniquely Lyra's own. The thing about working with damaged neural extensions, Marcus explained, is that the healing process often results in capabilities that exceed the original configuration. It's like when you break a bone and it heals stronger than before, except with crystalline structures, the enhancement can be much more dramatic. Lyra opened her eyes and looked at her reflection in the salon's mirror. The change was remarkable. Instead of the sickly, inward-pointing crystal masses that had characterized her condition for years, her extensions now formed elegant spiraling patterns that caught and reflected light in ways that created an almost hypnotic beauty. "I look like my mother," she whispered, and the crystals pulsed with a soft golden light.
"But different too. Like myself."
Ambassador Kethmori approached his daughter and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Lyra, you look like exactly who you were always meant to be." Dr. Thorne descended from the observation room, her excitement barely contained.
"Mr. Rivera, the Coalition Medical Council needs to document this treatment protocol immediately.
If your techniques can be taught to others, we could potentially help thousands of individuals suffering from similar conditions."
Marcus looked thoughtful.
"Dr. Thorne, I appreciate the interest, but I'm not sure my approach can be easily replicated."
"It's not really a medical technique. It's more like artistry combined with empathy.
You can't really teach someone to feel what damaged crystals are trying to communicate, any more than you can teach someone to instinctively know what will make a person feel beautiful." "But surely the basic principles can be codified," Dr. Thorne insisted. "The chemical treatments you use, the physical manipulation techniques, the emotional resonance protocols."
Marcus shrugged.
"The chemicals are mostly standard hair care products adapted for crystalline structures. The physical techniques are variations on basic styling methods. And the emotional resonance, well, that's just about paying attention to what the person needs and responding with genuine care."
Lyra looked up at Marcus with an expression of deep gratitude.
"Marcus, you saved my life. But, more than that, you helped me understand that I was never really broken. The crystals were just confused, and they needed someone to show them a better way to grow." "That's the key insight," Marcus replied. "Most of the time, when something seems broken beyond repair, it's actually just trying to solve the wrong problem. Your crystals were trying to protect you from pain, which is a good instinct. They just needed to learn that the best protection comes from connection, not isolation." Dr. Verix joined them from the observation room, his expression one of professional fascination mixed with personal warmth. "Lyra, your latest neural scans show activity patterns that exceed normal parameters for Zephyrian neural function.
You're not just healed, you're enhanced." "Enhanced how?" Ambassador Kethmori asked.
"Her emotional projection capabilities are approximately 3 times stronger than typical for her age group," Dr. Verix explained. "Her ability to consciously direct crystal growth patterns is similarly advanced. And her capacity for empathic resonance with other crystalline structures appears to be unprecedented.
Lyra's eyes widened with excitement. Does that mean I could help other people with crystal problems? Marcus smiled. That's exactly what it means, Lyra. Your crystals learn to heal in a very special way, and now they understand things about growth and repair that most crystals never figure out. You could teach them. The implications of this revelation hung in the air as everyone present realized they were witnessing something far more significant than a medical breakthrough. They were seeing the emergence of an entirely new form of healing, one that combined medical knowledge with artistic intuition and genuine human compassion. Ambassador Keth Mori spoke first. Mr. Rivera, the Zephyrian government would like to formally commission your services to help establish treatment protocols for other individuals suffering from crystal and neural disorders. And, the Coalition Medical Council would like to fund a comprehensive research program to document and study these techniques, Dr. Thorne added. Marcus looked around at the assembled group of distinguished physicians and diplomats, then down at Lyra, who was experimenting with creating different light patterns in her crystal formations. I appreciate the offers, and I'm definitely interested in helping other people. But I have one condition. Name it, Ambassador Keth Mori said immediately. Lyra gets to be my partner in this, Marcus said. Not just as a test subject, but as a genuine collaborator. She understands what damaged crystals are feeling in ways that I never could. If we're going to help other people, she needs to be part of the process. Lyra looked up from her crystal experiments, her face glowing with excitement. Really? I could help other people feel better? More than that, Marcus replied. You could teach them that being different doesn't mean being broken, that healing can make you stronger than you were before, and that sometimes the most beautiful things come from learning to work with your challenges instead of fighting against them. As the day's session came to an end, Lyra stood and walked to the salon's main mirror without assistance. Her reflection showed a young Zephyrian whose crystal formations created a crown of living light around her head, patterns that shifted and flowed in response to her emotions and thoughts. I'm ready to help, she said, her voice clear and strong. Let's go find some confused crystals and teach them how to shine. The transformation was complete, but the real work was just beginning. Lyra had become not just a success story, but a healer in her own right. And Marcus had discovered that sometimes the greatest innovations come not from advanced technology or sophisticated theory, but from the simple human understanding that every living thing deserves to feel beautiful, valued, and whole. Together, they were about to change the galaxy's approach to healing, one crystal at a time. 6 months after Lyra's first treatment, Harmony Hub had been transformed into something unprecedented in Coalition space, a medical facility that looked more like an art studio than a hospital. The entire sublevel C had been converted into the Rivera Zephyrian Healing Center, where traditional medical technology worked alongside hairstyling chairs, crystal cultivation gardens, and rooms filled with soft music and gentle lighting. Marcus stood in the main treatment area, watching as Lyra worked with their newest patient, a young Zephyrian named Kaven whose crystal formations had begun showing similar inward growth patterns after witnessing a traumatic accident. Unlike Lyra's advanced case, Kaven's condition had been caught early, but the fear and confusion in his bioluminescent extensions were just as real. Remember what we talked about, Lyra said gently, her own crystal formations glowing with a warm, reassuring light. Your crystals aren't trying to hurt you. They're just scared and don't know how to help properly. We need to show them a better way. Kaven, who was only 9 standard years old, looked up at Lyra with wide, trusting eyes. But what if they don't listen? What if they keep growing the wrong way? Lyra smiled and placed her hand near Kaven's temples, not quite touching but close enough for her enhanced neural extensions to create a resonance field with his. They'll listen. Crystals always want to help their person be happy and safe. They just sometimes get confused about the best way to do it. Marcus observed from a respectful distance, marveling at how naturally Lyra had adapted to her role as a healer. Her ability to empathically connect with damaged crystal formations had proven to be even more remarkable than anyone had initially realized. Where Marcus could provide the technical knowledge and physical techniques, Lyra offered something irreplaceable, the understanding that only comes from having experienced the condition firsthand. Dr. Thorne approached with her ever-present quantum pad, documenting everything for the comprehensive study that the Coalition Medical Council was funding.
Patient 17 shows the same initial response pattern we've observed in all previous cases.
Lyra's empathic resonance technique appears to establish trust with the damaged formations within the first few minutes of contact.
It's not really a technique, Marcus corrected gently.
Lyra is just being herself. The crystals respond to genuine empathy and understanding. You can't fake that kind of connection.
In the 6 months since they had begun treating other patients, word of their success had spread throughout Coalition space. They had helped 43 individuals suffering from various forms of crystal and neural disorders, with a success rate that had astounded the medical establishment. More importantly, they had developed a new understanding of how psychoactive crystalline structures responded to emotional environment and conscious direction.
The door to the treatment area opened, and Ambassador Kethmori entered with a visitor that made Marcus pause in surprise.
The newcomer was clearly human, but carried herself with the bearing of someone accustomed to command. Her graying hair was pulled back in a practical style, and her clothing bore the insignia of Earth's colonial administration.
"Marcus, Lyra, I'd like you to meet Admiral Sarah Chen," the ambassador said. "She's Admiral Chen's sister and the head of Earth's Xenobiological Research Division." Admiral Chen stepped forward, her expression mixing professional interest with personal curiosity.
"Mr. Rivera, my sister has told me remarkable things about your work here. The colonial administration is very interested in understanding how human intuition and empathy might contribute to interspecies medical collaboration."
Lyra looked up from her work with Kavan, her crystal formations flickering with curiosity. "Are there humans with crystal problems too?"
"Not exactly like yours," Admiral Chan replied with a smile. "But humans do have our own challenges with biological and technological integration. We're beginning to understand that the principles you've discovered here might apply to a much broader range of conditions." Marcus felt a familiar mixture of pride and concern. The attention their work was receiving was gratifying, but he worried about it being overanalyzed or bureaucratized.
"Admiral, what we do here isn't easily replicable.
It requires a specific combination of technical knowledge, empathic ability, and genuine care for the individual patient."
"Which is exactly why we're interested," Admiral Chen replied.
"The Coalition has the most advanced medical technology in the galaxy, but sometimes technology alone isn't enough. What you've demonstrated is that healing often requires an artistic, intuitive approach that complements scientific knowledge." Kavan's crystal formations had begun to glow more steadily under Lyra's influence, and the chaotic growth patterns that had marked his condition were visibly organizing themselves into healthier configurations. Marcus moved closer to provide the physical support that would help guide the transformation.
"The key," he explained to Admiral Chen as he worked, "is understanding that damaged crystals are usually trying to solve a problem, just not very effectively."
Kavan's extensions started growing inward because he witnessed something terrible, and his crystals decided the best way to protect him was to prevent him from fully processing what he saw. "But that just makes everything hurt worse," Kavan said, his young voice reflecting a wisdom beyond his years.
"Exactly," Lyra agreed, her own crystals pulsing with sympathetic understanding.
"So we teach them that the best protection comes from helping you understand and cope with difficult experiences, not hiding from them."
Admiral Chen watched the process with fascination. "The implications for human psychology are remarkable.
We've long known that avoidance behaviors often make trauma worse, but we've never had a way to literally reshape the neural structures that support those behaviors."
Dr. Thorne looked up from her notes. "Admiral, one of the most interesting aspects of this treatment approach is that it doesn't just address the symptoms. It actually enhances the patient's overall capabilities.
Every individual we've treated has shown improved empathic abilities, enhanced emotional resilience, and increased capacity for helping others."
"Like Lyra," Marcus said with pride.
"She's not just healed, she's become a healer herself. And that transformation happened because we worked with her natural abilities rather than trying to suppress or override them." As they spoke, Kavan's treatment session reached a breakthrough moment. His crystal formation suddenly shifted into a new configuration, one that channeled his traumatic memories into a form that his young mind could process and integrate. The fear and confusion that had characterized his condition dissolved, replaced by a sense of understanding and acceptance. "I can see what happened," Kavan said wonderingly, "but it doesn't hurt anymore. The crystals are showing me that bad things can happen, but they don't have to control how I feel about everything else. Lyra smiled and gently withdrew her empathic connection.
That's exactly right.
Your crystals learned how to help you be brave instead of just trying to hide scary things from you.
Admiral Chan approached Marcus as the session concluded. Mr. Rivera, I have a proposal. Earth's medical community would like to establish a formal collaboration with your center here.
We're not talking about taking over or changing what you do, but rather about learning from it and exploring how these principles might apply to human medical challenges.
Marcus considered the proposal carefully. What did you have in mind?
Exchange programs, Admiral Chan replied. Human medical professionals would come here to observe and learn your techniques, while you and Lyra would visit Earth to consult on cases involving biological-technological integration issues. Our military personnel, space colonists, and deep space explorers often face challenges that conventional medicine struggles to address.
Lyra's crystal formations brightened with excitement. Could we really help humans too?
I don't see why not, Marcus said thoughtfully. The principles are the same: understanding what the problem is really about, working with natural healing processes instead of against them, and approaching each person as a complete individual rather than just a collection of symptoms.
Dr. Thorne nodded enthusiastically. The research possibilities are extraordinary.
We could potentially revolutionize interspecies medicine, develop new therapeutic approaches for trauma recovery, and create healing modalities that address psychological and physical health as integrated systems.
Ambassador Keth Mori stepped forward. The Zephyrian government fully supports this collaboration.
Lyra and Marcus have given my people hope for conditions we thought were untreatable. If their techniques can help other species as well, it would be a gift to the entire galaxy.
Over the following hours, they discussed the details of the proposed collaboration.
Earth would provide funding and research support for expanding the healing center, while the coalition would document and study the techniques for potential application to other species. Most importantly, Lyra and Marcus would remain as the center's primary healers, ensuring that the personal, empathic approach that made their treatments successful would be preserved. As the day wound down, Lyra and Marcus stood together in the main treatment room, looking out through the viewing port at the stars beyond. The room was quiet except for the gentle harmonics generated by the crystal cultivation gardens, where new formations grew in patterns designed to promote healing and emotional well-being.
Marcus, Lyra said thoughtfully, do you ever think about how strange this all is?
6 months ago, I was dying, and you were just cutting hair.
Now we're about to teach healing techniques to the whole galaxy. Marcus smiled. Life has a way of surprising you. But, you know what's not strange about it?
The fact that it started with someone caring enough to try something different when everything else failed. And it worked because you listened to what my crystals were really trying to tell you, Lyra added. Instead of just trying to make them stop, you helped them learn how to help me better.
That's the secret, isn't it? Marcus mused.
Whether it's crystals, hair, or any other biological system, instead of fighting against natural processes, you work with them. You find out what they're trying to accomplish and help them do it more effectively. Lyra's crystal formations began to glow with a soft, steady light that reflected her contentment and sense of purpose.
I can't wait to meet the humans we'll be helping. Do you think their problems will be very different from ours? Probably not, Marcus replied.
Pain is pain, trauma is trauma, and the need to feel understood and cared for is universal. The specific details might be different, but the fundamental principles of healing should be the same. As they prepared to leave for the day, both Marcus and Lyra felt a sense of anticipation about the challenges and opportunities ahead. They had discovered something that transcended medical technology or scientific theory, the simple but profound truth that genuine healing requires not just technical knowledge, but empathy, creativity, and the willingness to see each individual as a unique being worthy of care and attention. Tomorrow would bring new patients, new challenges, and new opportunities to prove that sometimes the most revolutionary advances come not from complex technology, but from the fundamentally human understanding that everyone deserves to feel whole, beautiful, and valued. The healing revolution they had started was about to expand beyond anything they had imagined, but, at its heart, it would always remain true to the principles they had discovered in a simple salon on a space station orbiting Earth, that healing happens when technique meets empathy, when science combines with art, and when the determination to help someone feel beautiful becomes a force capable of changing the galaxy. 2 years had passed since that first desperate visit to Rivera's salon, and the galaxy had changed in ways no one could have anticipated. The Rivera's Ephirian healing method had spread to 17 different star systems, with treatment centers established on major worlds throughout Coalition space. But the real transformation went far deeper than the proliferation of healing facilities. Marcus stood on the observation deck of the newly commissioned medical vessel Harmony's Hope, watching as Earth grew larger in the viewscreen. Beside him, Lyra practiced her latest innovation, a form of empathic resonance that could calm and stabilize crystalline neural formations across vast distances. Her abilities had continued to evolve, and she had become something unprecedented in galactic history, an interspecies healer capable of working with biological, technological, and hybrid integration challenges.
Are you nervous about the Earth conference? Lyra asked, her crystal formations flickering with curiosity and excitement.
At 14 standard years old, she had grown into her enhanced abilities with remarkable grace, becoming not just a healer but a teacher and innovator in her own right. A little, Marcus admitted. When I started cutting hair 25 years ago, I never imagined I'd end up addressing the Galactic Medical Assembly about revolutionary healing techniques. The conference they were approaching was historic, the first joint meeting between Earth's medical establishment and the Coalition's finest physicians, with the specific goal of integrating empathic healing techniques into mainstream medical practice. Representatives from over 40 species would be attending, many bringing cases that conventional medicine had declared hopeless. Dr. Thorne approached from the ship's medical bay, her expression combining excitement with exhaustion. She had spent the past months documenting over 300 successful treatments using the Rivera's Ephirian method, creating the largest database of empathic healing techniques ever assembled. The preliminary results from the Centauri facility are remarkable, she reported. They've successfully adapted your techniques for treating Andromedan shell shock syndrome, something that's never been considered curable before. The combination of your empathic resonance protocols with Lyra's crystalline stabilization techniques has achieved complete recovery in 67% of cases. Marcus nodded, feeling the familiar mixture of pride and responsibility that had become his constant companion. How's the training program progressing? That's the most exciting part, Dr. Thorne replied. We've identified over 200 individuals across 17 species who show natural aptitude for empathic healing. Not all of them have Lyra's level of ability, but they're proving that the basic principles can be learned and applied by others. Lyra looked up from her meditation practice, her crystal formations brightening. Have any of the human trainees developed resonance abilities? Actually, yes, Dr. Thorne said with a smile. It turns out that humans have more empathic potential than anyone realized. Your techniques have awakened latent telepathic abilities in several human healers. Nothing as dramatic as Zephyrian crystal communication, but definite improvements in their ability to sense and respond to patient emotional states. The ship's communication system chimed, indicating an incoming priority message. Admiral Chen's face appeared on the main screen, but she was calling from what appeared to be a field hospital rather than her usual office. Marcus, Lyra, thank goodness you're almost here, Admiral Chen said, her expression urgent but hopeful. We've got a situation that we think you might be able to help with, but it's unlike anything we've encountered before. What kind of situation? Marcus asked. 3 days ago, a Coalition deep space exploration vessel encountered something extraordinary, a derelict ship of unknown origin containing what appear to be crystalline life forms. They're not like any species we've ever encountered, and they seem to be suffering from some kind of collective trauma. Traditional first contact protocols have been ineffective, and conventional medical approaches are useless because we can't even determine their basic biology. Lyra's crystal formations began pulsing rapidly, a sign of intense interest and concentration. Admiral Chen, are these crystalline beings similar to Zephyrian neural extensions? Could they be entirely crystalline organisms? That's what we're hoping you can help us determine, Admiral Chen replied. The beings seem to be in distress, but they don't respond to any form of communication we've attempted. However, when we played recordings of your healing sessions, their energy patterns showed significant changes. Marcus felt a familiar thrill of challenge and purpose. This was what he had learned to love about their work. Each new case brought unique puzzles that required creativity, empathy, and the willingness to approach problems from entirely new angles. "Admiral, we'll beam down to your facility as soon as we achieve orbit," Marcus said.
"Can you tell us anything else about these beings?"
"Only that they're beautiful, clearly intelligent, and obviously suffering," Admiral Chen replied. "They're being held in a specially constructed containment facility that maintains their natural environment, but we're running out of time. Their energy patterns are deteriorating, and we're afraid we might lose them if we can't establish some form of contact soon." As the communication ended, Lyra turned to Marcus with an expression of determination that he had learned to recognize. It was the look she got when she encountered a healing challenge that really mattered to her.
"Marcus, I think I know what might be wrong with them," she said.
"If they're crystalline life forms that were found on a derelict ship, they might be experiencing collective grief. Just like my crystals were trying to protect me from the pain of losing my mother, these beings might be trying to protect themselves from the trauma of losing their entire civilization." The implications hit Marcus immediately.
And, if that's the case, traditional medical approaches wouldn't work because the problem isn't biological or technical. It's emotional and psychological.
3 hours later, they stood in a specially constructed chamber deep beneath the Earth Medical Facility, looking at the most extraordinary beings any of them had ever encountered. The crystalline entities were roughly humanoid in shape but composed entirely of what appeared to be living crystal that shifted and flowed like liquid light. There were 7 of them, clustered together in the center of the chamber, their forms pulsing with energy patterns that clearly indicated distress. Dr. Sarah Kim, Earth's leading xenobiologist, briefed them on what had been discovered so far. "We've determined that they communicate through harmonic resonance, similar to Zephyrian crystal communication but much more complex. They seem to be a collective consciousness, but one that's been severely traumatized. Their ship showed signs of massive damage, and quantum dating suggests it's been drifting in space for over 1,000 years." Lyra approached the containment field slowly, her own crystal formations beginning to resonate in response to the being's energy patterns. "They're so sad," she whispered.
"I can feel it even through the containment field.
They've been alone for so long, and they think everyone they ever knew is gone." Marcus studied the beings carefully, noting how their crystal formations moved and shifted. Despite their alien nature, there were similarities to the patterns he had learned to read in Zephyrian neural extensions. The chaotic, inward-turning energy flows, the protective clustering behavior, the way they seemed to be trying to shield themselves from external contact, it was all familiar.
"Dr. Kim, can we safely establish direct contact with them?" Marcus asked.
"The containment field can be modified to allow limited interaction," Dr. Kim replied. "But we have no idea how they might react to direct contact with other crystalline entities."
Lyra was already moving toward the control panel. "There's only one way to find out. Marcus, I think we need to approach this like we would any other healing session.
These beings aren't dangerous, they're just hurt and scared, and they've been alone for longer than we can imagine." With the containment field modified to allow interaction, Lyra slowly extended her hand toward the crystalline beings. Her neural extensions began to glow with the warm, welcoming light that Marcus had seen her use with hundreds of patients. The moment her crystals came into contact with the being's energy field, the reaction was immediate and dramatic. The 7 entities suddenly straightened, their forms becoming more defined and organized. The chaotic energy patterns that had marked their distress began to shift into more stable configurations, and, for the first time since their discovery, they seemed to notice the presence of others in the chamber. What happened next was unprecedented in the history of first contact. Instead of attempting verbal or technological communication, the beings began to sing. It was a harmonic resonance so complex and beautiful that everyone in the chamber felt their hearts lift despite not understanding a single element of the musical language. Lyra responded instinctively, her own crystal formations creating harmonics that complemented the being's song. The 2 forms of crystalline communication merged into something that transcended both species' individual capabilities, creating a bridge of empathy and understanding that needed no translation. Marcus watched in awe as his young partner established the first successful communication with an entirely unknown species, not through advanced technology or diplomatic protocols, but through the simple act of responding to pain with compassion. The song continued for several minutes, during which the crystalline being's distress patterns dissolved completely. When the harmonics finally faded, the entities had transformed into forms of breathtaking beauty, their crystal bodies now glowing with stable, confident light.
One of the beings approached Lyra directly, its form shifting into configurations that were clearly intentional communication.
Lyra listened carefully to the harmonic patterns, her expression growing amazed. "Marcus," she said softly, "they're not just grateful for the contact.
They're offering to teach us.
They say their people were healers too, before their world was destroyed. They've been carrying knowledge of crystal and healing techniques that we never imagined possible." Dr. Kim stared at the readings on her instruments.
"The energy patterns they're generating are unlike anything in our database.
If they're willing to share their knowledge, we could be looking at healing techniques that are thousands of years in advance of anything we currently understand." The leading crystalline being continued its harmonic communication with Lyra, and her crystal formations brightened with excitement as she translated. "They say they've been waiting for someone who could understand their pain, someone who had learned to heal trauma rather than just treat symptoms. They want to establish a partnership, to create a new form of healing that combines their ancient knowledge with our empathic techniques." Marcus felt a profound sense of completion as he realized what they had accomplished. What had started as a desperate attempt to save one dying child had evolved into a galactic healing revolution, and now it was opening the door to contact with entirely new forms of life. Over the following days, the partnership between the crystalline beings, who called themselves the Resonant, and the Rivera Zephyrian healing team produced innovations that revolutionized their understanding of empathic medicine. The resonance techniques for healing collective trauma, combined with human empathy and Zephyrian crystal communication, created therapeutic approaches that could address suffering on scales never before imagined. The Healing Center on Harmony Hub became the first interspecies medical facility, staffed by humans, Zephyrians, and resonant healers working together. Patients came from across the galaxy, bringing challenges that ranged from individual trauma to species-wide psychological disorders. As Marcus stood in the main treatment area one evening, watching Lyra work with a young resonant to help a veteran suffering from combat trauma, he reflected on the journey that had brought them here. A simple hairstylist and a dying diplomat's daughter had discovered that the most advanced healing in the galaxy came not from sophisticated technology, but from the fundamental understanding that every being deserved to feel whole, valued, and beautiful. The veteran they were treating, a human soldier who had been declared permanently disabled by conventional medicine, stood up and walked for the first time in 2 years. As he moved, his face showed not just physical recovery but emotional healing, the kind of deep transformation that only came when someone felt truly understood and cared for.
"You know what's the most amazing thing about all this?"
Lyra said to Marcus as they watched their patient leave the facility with tears of joy streaming down his face.
"What's that? We didn't really invent anything new.
We just remembered something that everyone had forgotten, that healing happens when you treat people like they matter, when you listen to what they really need, and when you help them remember that they're beautiful exactly as they are." Marcus smiled, looking around at the facility that had grown from a small salon into a galactic center of healing innovation. Humans, Zephyrians, Resonant, and dozens of other species worked together, each contributing their unique abilities to the art of empathic healing. "And the most beautiful thing of all," Marcus replied, "is that it all started with a father who refused to give up hope, and a daughter who taught us that sometimes being broken is just the beginning of becoming something wonderful." Outside the windows of the healing center, the stars shone with the light of a galaxy where suffering had become the catalyst for connection, where differences were celebrated as opportunities for learning, and where the simple human understanding that everyone deserved to feel beautiful had become the foundation for a new age of healing. The revolution that had begun in a humble salon with scissors, a comb, and an impossible case had transformed not just medicine, but the very way species across the galaxy understood what it meant to care for one another. And, at its heart, it remained true to the principle that had made it all possible, that the most powerful healing force in the universe was not technology or knowledge, but the simple act of one being helping another to shine.